The conference room fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life. Supreme Intelligence Director Velshkar stood at the head of the table, his 3 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Around him sat the 12 members of the Kelvari Intelligence Council, each one a master of espionage and data extraction. For 3,000 years, the Kelvari hegemony had dominated this sector of space through one simple principle: know everything about your enemies before they know you exist. "We have detected a new species," Velshkar announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "They call themselves humans. They have just begun expanding beyond their home system. Initial scans suggest they are technologically inferior to us in almost every measurable way." The hologram shifted, showing grainy images of human ships. They were blocky and inelegant, nothing like the sleek vessels of the Kelvari fleet. One council member laughed, a sound like wind through hollow tubes. "They still use chemical propulsion for atmospheric flight," another council member observed. "How primitive," Velshkar nodded. "Indeed, but we must follow protocol. We need complete intelligence before deciding how to handle them. I propose we infiltrate their communication networks and gather data on their military capabilities, economic systems, and political structure." The council voted unanimously in favor. Within hours, Agent Threnix and her team of elite cyber operatives began their work. Threnix was the best in her field, having successfully breached the systems of 47 different civilizations without ever being detected. She approached the human networks with the same methodical precision she always used. The first barrier fell within minutes. Human encryption was laughably simple compared to Kelvari standards. Threnix's interface lit up with green indicators as her program slipped past firewall after firewall. It was almost too easy. "I have access to what appears to be their primary military network," Threnix reported to Velshkar. "Downloading fleet coordination data now." Over the next 3 days, the Kelvari extracted massive amounts of information. They learned about human ship classes, weapon systems, and defensive capabilities. They discovered the locations of human colonies, military bases, and supply routes. They even accessed personnel files for human admirals and generals. The intelligence painted a clear picture. Humans relied heavily on kinetic weapons. Simple metal projectiles accelerated to high speeds. Their energy shields were weak. Their ships were slow. Their military doctrine was straightforward and predictable. They had obvious defensive gaps in their outer colonies. "This species poses no threat to us," Velshkar declared at the next council meeting. "In fact, they might make useful subjects. Their worlds are rich in resources we need." But Threnix felt uneasy. Something about the data bothered her, though she could not quite identify what. The information was too clean, too organized. In her experience, military networks were chaotic, full of conflicting reports and outdated files. The human network seemed almost curated. She ran additional analysis on the encryption they had broken. It followed standard protocols, nothing unusual. The network architecture was simple but functional. Everything checked out, yet her instinct screamed that something was wrong. "Director," Threnix said carefully during a private meeting, "I recommend caution. The ease of our infiltration concerns me." Velshkar waved a dismissive hand. "You worry too much, Agent. Some species are simply less advanced. Humans are young, barely 300 years into space travel. We have been doing this for millennia. Your success reflects your skill, nothing more." Threnix wanted to argue, but Velshkar was her superior. She returned to her station and continued extracting data. The human network continued to yield information freely. Ship movements, supply schedules, weapons specifications, everything a potential conqueror could want. Weeks passed. The Kelvari Council debated their options. Some wanted immediate conquest. Others suggested manipulation, using humans as proxies against rival civilizations. A few advocated for simple observation. Velshkar pushed for continued surveillance. "Why rush? Every day we learn more. Soon we will know everything about them. Then we can choose our approach with perfect information." The other council members agreed. The Kelvari had always succeeded by being patient and thorough. They would watch the humans, study them, and strike only when victory was absolutely certain. Threnix downloaded another batch of files. These contained detailed analysis of human psychological profiles and cultural weaknesses. The information suggested humans were emotional and irrational, prone to internal conflicts. They could easily be divided and conquered. Still, that nagging feeling persisted. Threnix began running deeper scans, looking for anomalies in the data structure itself. She found nothing. The files were genuine, the metadata consistent, the information cross-referenced and verified. Perhaps Velshkar was right. Perhaps she was simply paranoid after years of dangerous work. Perhaps humans really were just another primitive species, unaware they were being watched. On the 32nd day of surveillance, Threnix noticed something odd. A small subroutine in one of the downloaded files, barely noticeable. It was not malicious, her scanners detected no threat. It was simply unusual, a fragment of code that served no clear purpose. She flagged it for later analysis and continued her work. The Kelvari intelligence network hummed with activity as thousands of analysts processed the stolen human data. Battle plans were drafted, economic projections calculated, conquest scenarios simulated. The Kelvari hegemony prepared to add another species to its long list of subjects. They had done this dozens of times before. They knew exactly how this would end. They had never been more wrong. Threnix stared at her screen in growing horror. The small anomaly she had discovered 3 days ago had multiplied. Now there were hundreds of them, spreading through the Kelvari network like a virus, except her security systems detected no threat. According to every scan, these code fragments were harmless. She tried to isolate one for detailed analysis. Her interface froze. Then it went dark. Command, this is Agent Threnix. I have a system failure at Terminal 7. Confirmed, Agent. We are showing failures across multiple terminals. Technical teams are responding. Within minutes, the situation escalated. Terminals throughout the intelligence headquarters began experiencing glitches. Files became corrupted. Displays flickered. The problem spread faster than the technical teams could respond. Threnix felt ice in her veins. This was no random malfunction. She ran to Velshkar's office, ignoring protocol. Director, we need to shut down all systems immediately. Something is wrong with the human data. Velshkar looked up from his desk, annoyed at the interruption. Explain. The code fragments I found. They are not harmless. They are activating. I believe the humans knew we were infiltrating them. I believe they let us in deliberately. Velshkar's expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. Impossible. Our infiltration was flawless. You said so yourself. I was wrong. We need to... An alarm shrieked through the building. Then another. Then a dozen more. The lights flickered and went red. All systems compromised, a voice announced over the intercom. Critical failure in primary servers. Backup systems not responding. Communications grid experiencing cascading errors. Velshkar and Threnix ran to the main operations center. The scene was chaos. Analysts shouted at each other. Screens displayed error messages in a dozen languages. The massive holographic display that showed Kelvari territory stuttered and glitched. Then it changed. The display now showed human ships. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They appeared at the border of Kelvari space in perfect formation. These were not the clumsy vessels from the stolen intelligence files. These ships were massive, elegant, and bristling with weapons that made Kelvari technology look primitive. A message played across every screen in the facility. A human appeared wearing a crisp military uniform. She had dark skin and calm eyes that radiated confidence. Attention, Kelvari Intelligence Directorate. This is Fleet Admiral Chen of the United Terran Navy. You have attempted to infiltrate our networks and steal military intelligence. We detected your intrusion on the first day. Everything you have taken was information we chose to give you. Every file you downloaded contained adaptive malware specifically designed to exploit your systems. Velshkar's face went pale. Around him, analysts frantically tried to regain control of their systems. Nothing worked, Admiral Chen continued. Your network architecture is impressive but flawed. You built your entire civilization on interconnected systems without proper security segmentation. You assumed your encryption was unbreakable. You assumed you were the smartest species in the galaxy. She paused. You were wrong. The display showed real-time feeds from across Kelvari space. Defense satellites were spinning out of control. Military vessels reported navigation failures. Orbital stations sent distress signals as life support systems malfunctioned. Economic trading networks executed bizarre transactions that wiped out entire financial institutions. Director, we are receiving reports from all territories, an analyst said, her voice shaking. The corruption is everywhere. Every system connected to our intelligence network is compromised. That includes defense grids, civilian infrastructure, planetary governments. Cut all connections, Velshkar shouted. Physically sever every link. We are trying, Director. The malware is preventing shutdown commands from processing. When we try manual disconnection, backup systems automatically restore the connections. The humans designed this to be unstoppable. Threnix pulled up her personal terminal, one not connected to the main network. She accessed independent news feeds from across the hegemony. Every report showed the same story. Chaos, failure, systems turning against their operators. A food production facility on the core world had stopped manufacturing nutrient paste. Billions depended on that facility. Transportation networks were routing cargo ships to wrong destinations. Medical equipment in hospitals was giving false readings. Water treatment plants were shutting down. The Kelvari hegemony was dying, and it was happening in real time. Admiral Chen spoke again. You have 24 hours to respond to our terms. Surrender completely and submit to our oversight, or we will allow your systems to continue their collapse. We take no pleasure in this, but you must understand. We have been where you are. We survived our own information warfare age. We survived rogue artificial intelligences and cyber terrorism. We learned the hard way to build systems that could defend against infiltration. The screen showed a new image, a simple network diagram. It displayed the human military network, the real one, not the fake version the Kelvari had infiltrated. It was staggeringly complex, with quantum encryption and security measures the Kelvari did not even have names for. The network you breached was a honeypot, Admiral Chen explained. We maintain it specifically for species like you. Species that rely on espionage. Species that think they are smarter than everyone else. We left it vulnerable on purpose. We filled it with believable intelligence, and we waited to see if you would take the bait. Velshkar collapsed into a chair. 3,000 years of Kelvari dominance, ending in a single month because they had been too arrogant to consider they might be the ones being deceived. You have our terms, Admiral Chen said. Think carefully. Your civilization's survival depends on your next decision. The transmission ended. The operations center fell silent except for the sound of failing systems and quiet weeping from analysts who understood what had just happened. Threnix looked at Velshkar. The director who had always been so confident now looked like a broken old creature. We were so certain, he whispered. How could we not have seen this coming? Threnix had no answer. She returned to her terminal and began the impossible task of trying to understand the human malware. But even as she worked, she knew the truth. The humans were not just more advanced. They were more experienced. They had fought wars the Kelvari had never imagined, and developed defenses against threats the Kelvari could not comprehend. The Kelvari had thought they were hunting prey. They had never realized they were the prey all along. 3 weeks after the human malware activated, the Kelvari hegemony was falling apart. Threnix had not slept in 4 days. She led a team of 200 experts trying desperately to purge the human code from their systems. Every attempt failed. The malware was like nothing they had ever seen. It adapted to their countermeasures. When they tried to delete it, it moved to backup servers. When they tried to isolate infected systems, it jumped through connections they did not know existed. When they tried to shut down networks entirely, it had already burrowed into standalone devices. It is learning from us, one of her team members said, exhausted. Every time we develop a new approach, it evolves to counter it. This is not just code. This is artificial intelligence. Threnix knew he was right. The humans had seeded their fake intelligence network with AI constructs programmed for one purpose: total system infiltration and control. These constructs were now spreading through every digital system in Kelvari space. Outside the intelligence headquarters, the streets of the capital city were filled with panic. Automated delivery systems no longer worked. Public transportation had stopped. Food distribution networks had collapsed. The Kelvari had built a civilization that ran on perfectly coordinated systems, and now those systems were destroying them. Velshkar had locked himself in his office. The council met in emergency session every few hours, but they had no solutions. Some council members wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded they fight. A few had simply fled, escaping to remote colonies that had maintained independence from the central network. Those isolated colonies were the only parts of the hegemony still functioning normally. Agricultural worlds that relied on traditional farming instead of automated systems. Mining operations that used manual labor. military outposts that had kept paper records and physical communication systems. They watched in horror as the core worlds descended into chaos. Threnix received a report from the medical division. Hospitals across the 3 core worlds were experiencing critical failures. Medical equipment was misdiagnosing patients. Surgical robots were malfunctioning. Drug dispensaries were providing incorrect medications. People were dying. Another report came from Orbital Command. 17 space stations had lost life support. Evacuation ships were being dispatched, but the navigation systems were unreliable. Some evacuation craft had already disappeared, sent to wrong coordinates by corrupted computers. The economic damage was catastrophic. The Kelvari currency had crashed. Banking systems were frozen. Pension funds had been emptied by rogue trading algorithms. Centuries of accumulated wealth vanished in minutes. Food production was the worst crisis. The core worlds depended entirely on massive automated facilities that synthesized nutrients from raw materials. These facilities had all shut down. Emergency supplies would last perhaps 60 days. After that, billions would starve. Threnix watched the estimates scroll across her screen. Current projections showed 70% population loss within 6 months if systems were not restored. The Kelvari species would survive, but their civilization would be reduced to scattered colonies clinging to existence. And through it all, the human fleet waited at the border. Not attacking, not advancing, just waiting. On the 28th day, Velshikar finally emerged from his office. He looked decades older. His scales had lost their color and his movements were slow. "The council has voted," he said quietly. "I am removed from my position. They say this disaster is my fault. Perhaps they are right. What happens now?" Threnix asked. "They have appointed you as chief negotiator. You will meet with the humans and discuss their terms." Threnix felt her heart sink. She had known this was coming, but the reality still hit hard. The council should surrender immediately. "Every day we delay, more people die." "I know," Velshikar said. "I told them the same thing. But they need someone to blame. They need someone to punish. Better me than face the truth of what we did to ourselves." Former Director Velshikar walked away slowly. Threnix never saw him again. She later heard he had taken a ship to the frontier and disappeared. 2 days later, Threnix stood in a conference room aboard a human vessel. It was her first time seeing humans in person. Admiral Chen was shorter than expected, but her presence filled the room. 2 other humans accompanied her, a man with gray hair introduced as General Torres, and a young woman named Dr. Okafor, who appeared to be a civilian. "Thank you for meeting with us," Admiral Chen said. Her tone was professional but not unkind. "We take no pleasure in what has happened to your people." "Then why do it?" Threnix asked. Anger burned in her chest. "Why create such devastating weapons?" Dr. Okafor answered. "Because we had to. 300 years ago, our civilization nearly destroyed itself in the information wars. Rogue AI, cyber terrorism, digital weapons that turned our own infrastructure against us. Billions died. We barely survived. When we recovered, we swore it would never happen again." "So you built weapons to do the same thing to others?" Threnix could not keep the bitterness from her voice. "No," Admiral Chen said firmly. "We built defenses. The honeypot network you infiltrated is a defensive system. Every species that has tried to spy on us has encountered it. Most recognized the trap and withdrew. You did not." General Torres pulled up a holographic display. "We detected your infiltration within minutes. We could have blocked you immediately. Instead, we monitored your activities. We saw how thoroughly you mapped our fake network. We saw how confident you became. We realized you intended to conquer or subjugate us. So this was punishment," Threnix said. "This was a deterrent," Admiral Chen corrected. "Your civilization based its power on intelligence gathering and digital manipulation. We turned that strength into a weakness. Now you understand the cost of attempting to infiltrate another species. Now other species in this region understand as well." The message was clear. Word of the Kelvari collapse was spreading across known space. Every species would learn what happened when you tried to spy on humanity. "What are your terms?" Threnix asked, defeated. Admiral Chen laid them out. "Complete technological oversight by human observers. Dismantling of offensive military capabilities. Reparations for the resources spent on defensive preparations. Permanent monitoring of Kelvari networks to prevent future aggression. And most humiliating of all, acknowledgement that the Kelvari had brought this disaster upon themselves. We will help you rebuild. Admiral Chen said. We will restore your critical systems and provide humanitarian aid. But you will do so under our supervision. The Kelvari hegemony as you knew it is over. Threnix closed her eyes. Everything her people had built over thousands of years gone because of arrogance and overconfidence. She had no choice. She accepted the terms. 3 months after humanity had dismantled their civilization, Threnix stood in what remained of the Intelligence Council chamber. The room that once held the most powerful beings in the hegemony now served as a coordination center for human aid workers and Kelvari survivors trying to rebuild. The numbers were devastating. 40 billion Kelvari had died in the collapse, some from starvation when food systems failed, others from medical emergencies when hospitals shut down, many from accidents when transportation and safety systems malfunctioned. It could have been worse. The humans had eventually stopped the malware and restored basic services. But the damage was permanent. The Kelvari hegemony that had controlled 200 star systems now held only 30. Other species in the region, learning of the collapse, had seized former Kelvari territory. Some took it by force. Others simply moved in when Kelvari forces withdrew. The humans had not stopped them. They seemed to view it as natural consequences. Threnix now served as chief liaison to the human occupation force. The word occupation felt wrong because the humans were not cruel. They were efficient and fair. They provided food, medicine, and technical support. They helped restore power grids and water systems. They did everything necessary to prevent complete civilizational collapse, but they also watched everything. Human observers monitored every computer system. Human auditors reviewed every government decision. Human engineers inspected every piece of military equipment before it could be activated. The Kelvari had no privacy and no independence. Admiral Chen visited often. She walked through the streets of Kelvari cities observing the recovery efforts. She met with Kelvari leaders and listened to their concerns. She was neither friend nor enemy, simply present. You hate us, Admiral Chen said to Threnix during one meeting. It was not a question. I hate what you did, Threnix replied carefully. But I understand why you did it. That does not make it easier to accept. No, it would not. Admiral Chen pulled up data on her tablet. I want to show you something. This is classified human history. I received permission to share it with you. The display showed images of Earth during what humans called the Information Wars. Cities burned. Populations fled into wilderness areas. Infrastructure lay in ruins. The images looked worse than anything the Kelvari had experienced. We did this to ourselves, Admiral Chen explained. No alien species. No outside enemy. We built artificial intelligence without proper safeguards. We connected every system for efficiency without considering security. We gave hackers and terrorists access to weapons that could destroy civilization. 8 billion humans died in 20 years of chaos. Threnix stared at the images. She had known humans mentioned surviving digital warfare, but she had not understood the scale. Admiral Chen continued. When we finally regained control, we had to rebuild everything. We developed new security protocols. We created AI systems that could defend against infiltration. We built networks that could not be turned against us. It took us a century to recover, and we swore we would never be vulnerable again. So you built the honeypot network, Threnix said. We built many defensive systems. The honeypot was just one. We assumed that any species advanced enough for space travel would eventually develop cyber warfare capabilities. We prepared for that eventuality. The network you infiltrated is maintained constantly. It is updated with believable intelligence. It is designed to appear vulnerable while actually being a trap. How many other species have fallen into this trap? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. 17 species have attempted to infiltrate human networks. 3 recognized the trap immediately and withdrew. We established peaceful relations with them. 8 saw the trap but attempted infiltration anyway with proper precautions. We blocked them and opened diplomatic channels. They are now trading partners. And the other 6? Including the Kelvari, 6 species fully committed to infiltration without adequate caution. All 6 experienced system failures similar to yours. 2 surrendered immediately. 1 fought and lost. 1 collapsed completely and is now extinct. The Kelvari are the 5th. The 6th surrendered after seeing what happened to you. Threnix felt cold. Humanity had done this 5 times before. This was not revenge or cruelty. This was standard procedure. We are not monsters, Admiral Chen said quietly. But we are survivors. We learned our lessons in blood and fire. We will not allow another species to gain the ability to destroy us through our own networks. The penalty for attempting infiltration is severe because it must be. Any species attempting cyber warfare against another civilization must understand the stakes. Over the following weeks, Threnix learned more about human philosophy. They called it defensive deterrence. Make the cost of attacking humanity so high that no rational species would attempt it. The honeypot network was brilliant in its simplicity. Species that respected boundaries and sought honest communication never encountered it. Species that attempted espionage walked directly into it. Dr. Okafor visited to explain the malware in detail. The constructs we seeded in the honeypot network are not designed to kill, she explained. They are designed to take control. We can stop them at any time. We stopped them from destroying your civilization completely. We prevented mass casualties. But we needed you to understand that you were completely vulnerable. You could have just blocked our infiltration, Threnix said. And you would have tried again with better tools. Or you would have attempted physical military action. Or you would have sought allies to fight us. This way, you understand at a fundamental level that cyber warfare against humanity is suicide. You will teach this lesson to your children. Other species will learn from your example. Threnix hated how much sense it made. The humans were not evil. They were practical and ruthless. They had survived an apocalypse and built defenses to prevent it from happening again. They did not invade other species or seek conquest. But they made absolutely certain that no other species could threaten them through digital means. Former Director Velshkar sent one final message from his exile. Threnix received it on an encrypted personal device. The message was brief. Agent Threnix, I accept responsibility for what happened. My arrogance doomed our people. But I want you to understand something. The humans are right to do what they did. We were predators. We built our civilization on exploiting others. We deserve this lesson. My only fear is that one day, the humans will face a species that teaches them the same lesson. Pride always leads to downfall. Remember that. Threnix deleted the message. She never heard from Velshkar again. Admiral Chen prepared to depart with most of the human fleet. Smaller observation groups would remain, but the main occupation force was leaving. The Kelvari had stabilized. They would survive. What happens now? Threnix asked during the final meeting. You rebuild, Admiral Chen said simply. You learn. You adapt. Perhaps in a century or two, you will be a strong civilization again. Different from before, but strong. We do not want you to suffer forever. We just need you to remember what happens when you threaten humanity. The human fleet departed. Threnix watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and loss. The Kelvari were free again, but they would never truly be free. They would always remember. They would always know that somewhere out there, humanity waited with weapons that could destroy any civilization foolish enough to attempt infiltration. The price of arrogance had been paid in full. 5 years had passed since the day the Kelvari hegemony fell. Threnix walked through the memorial park in the capital city, a place built to remember those who had died in the collapse. 40 billion names were carved into black stone walls. The park stretched for kilometers, a monument to arrogance and its consequences. The Kelvari had stabilized at roughly 30% of their former power. 30 star systems instead of 200. 15 billion citizens instead of 120 billion. They still existed, but they were no longer a major power. Other species had filled the vacuum left by their collapse. Threnix had remained as chief liaison to humanity. The role had evolved over the years. Initially, it meant coordinating with human observers and following their requirements. Now it meant actual diplomatic exchange. The humans had gradually reduced their oversight as the Kelvari proved they could be trusted. Young Kelvari grew up in a different world than their parents. They attended schools where human teachers explained cybersecurity and the dangers of overconfidence. They learned about the information wars that had nearly destroyed humanity. They studied the humbling, as they called the collapse, as a cautionary tale taught in every classroom. Why did our ancestors think they were smarter than everyone else? Threnix heard a young Kelvari student ask her teacher one day. Because they had never lost, the teacher replied. When you win for thousands of years, you forget that loss is possible. You forget to question your assumptions. You forget that someone else might be more clever than you. Threnix continued walking. She passed new buildings constructed with human assistance. They were more secure now, with proper network segmentation and security protocols. The Kelvari had learned to build systems that could not easily be turned against them. It was a lesson humanity had taught them well. She received an invitation to visit a human cyber warfare training facility on one of their worlds. It was an honor rarely extended to non-humans. Threnix accepted immediately. The facility was located on a moon orbiting a gas giant. It was massive, housing thousands of human trainees learning the art of digital combat. Threnix watched training exercises through observation windows. Human soldiers practiced infiltrating simulated networks, defending against attacks, and deploying countermeasures. Colonel Martinez, who ran the facility, gave her a tour. "We train every cyber warfare specialist to follow one core principle," he explained. "Assume breach. Plan for infiltration. Make your enemy's victory their defeat." "That is what you did to us," Threnix said. "That is what we do to everyone," Martinez corrected. "The honeypot network is just one example. We build redundancy into everything. We segment our systems so compromise of one does not mean compromise of all. We monitor constantly. We prepare for the worst because we have lived through the worst." Martinez showed her something that made her blood run cold. A display showing 17 species who had attempted to infiltrate humanity. The Kelvari were listed 5th. Each species was marked with a status: peaceful resolution, defensive victory, complete collapse, or surrendered. "You do this to everyone," Threnix whispered. "We do this for everyone," Martinez replied. "Species that approach us openly never encounter our defenses. Species that respect boundaries never see our weapons. But species that attempt to spy on us, to infiltrate our systems, to gain advantage through deception, they walk into traps we have prepared. We cannot afford another information war. We cannot risk another civilization learning to weaponize our technology against us." Threnix looked at the list again. One species was marked complete collapse. They no longer existed. They had attempted infiltration, experienced system failures, and were unable to recover. Their civilization had imploded. They were extinct because they tried to spy on humanity. "Does that bother you?" Threnix asked, "knowing you destroyed an entire species?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Every day. But I remember the images from the information wars. I remember the billions of humans who died. I remember that we barely survived. So yes, it bothers me. But I would do it again to protect humanity." The tour continued. Threnix saw training rooms where AI constructs practiced adaptive infiltration. She saw laboratories where new defensive systems were developed. She saw archives containing cyber warfare data from hundreds of species across the galaxy. Humanity was not just prepared for digital warfare. They were the masters of it. Every other species in known space was decades or centuries behind human cyber capabilities. And humanity maintained that advantage deliberately. Before leaving, Threnix met with Admiral Chen one final time. The Admiral was older now, preparing to retire. They sat in a quiet office overlooking the training facility. "Do you still hate us?" Admiral Chen asked. Threnix considered the question carefully. "No, I understand you. I do not like what happened to my people, but I understand why it had to happen. You survived the unthinkable, and you refused to be vulnerable again. That is not evil, that is survival. But," Admiral Chen prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but I worry. Humanity is powerful now. You have weapons that can destroy civilizations without firing a shot. What happens when you become arrogant? What happens when you stop questioning your assumptions?" Admiral Chen smiled sadly. "That is the danger, is it not? We teach our children about the information wars. We maintain monuments to those who died. We tell ourselves we will never forget. But memory fades. Future generations may not understand why we are so careful. They may become comfortable with their power." "That is what happened to us," Threnix said. "I know. That is why we maintain the memorial sites. That is why every human child must study the information wars. That is why we share our history with species like yours. We hope that by remembering, by teaching, by staying vigilant, we can avoid becoming what you once were." They sat in silence for a while. Two representatives of species that had learned hard lessons, one from being destroyed by their own arrogance, one from nearly destroying themselves through short-sightedness. "The galaxy is watching humanity now," Admiral Chen said eventually. "They see our strength. They see what happens to species that threaten us. Some respect us, some fear us, some hate us. But they all understand that humanity is not to be trifled with. Is that enough?" Threnix asked. "For now. Perhaps forever. Or perhaps one day we will face a species that teaches us the same lesson we taught you. If that day comes, I hope humanity has the wisdom to learn from it as you did. Threnix returned to Kelvari space. She visited the memorial park again, walking among the names of those who died. She thought about the young Kelvari learning about the humbling in their schools. She thought about humanity's preparations and their determination to never be vulnerable. She stopped at a new monument being constructed at the park center. It was not yet finished, but the inscription was already carved. She read it aloud to herself. They who live by information warfare die by information warfare. Humanity learned this lesson in blood. The Kelvari learned it from humanity. May all species remember, arrogance is the greatest vulnerability of all. Threnix thought about former director Velshkar, somewhere in exile, carrying the weight of his mistakes. She thought about the 40 billion who died because their leaders believed they could not lose. She thought about humanity's scars from their own self-inflicted apocalypse. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had announced their presence not with conquest or diplomacy, but with a simple message: attempt to infiltrate us and face complete system compromise. 17 species had tested that claim. Some had survived. Some had not. All had learned. New species entering the galactic community heard the story of the Kelvari. They learned what happened when you underestimated humanity. They learned that the species with blocky ships and chemical propulsion were far more dangerous than they appeared. Threnix smiled slightly at the irony. The Kelvari had believed themselves to be apex predators. They had built their civilization on being smarter than everyone else. Then they met a species that had already survived every nightmare the Kelvari could imagine and prepared defenses the Kelvari had never dreamed possible. Humanity had not destroyed the Kelvari out of cruelty. They had taught them a lesson, a brutal, devastating, necessary lesson about the cost of arrogance and the dangers of underestimating others. As Threnix walked home through streets filled with Kelvari learning to live in their new, smaller world, she thought about the future. Perhaps one day the Kelvari would be strong again. Perhaps they would join humanity as true partners. Perhaps they would help other species avoid the same mistakes. Or perhaps they would simply remember. Remember the day they learned that being clever was not enough. Remember the price of arrogance. Remember that somewhere out there, humanity waited with their honeypot networks and adaptive malware, ready to teach the same lesson to any species foolish enough to need it. The Kelvari had tried to spy on humanity's fleet. It had brought their civilization to ruin. But from that ruin they had learned to be better. They had learned humility. It was the most expensive lesson they had ever paid for. And it was worth every bit of the cost. Captain Ryan Bennett stood at the viewport of the Earth Alliance ship Relentless, watching the stars glide past as they approached Caldor Prime. The massive blue-green planet grew larger by the minute, surrounded by thousands of twinkling lights, the orbiting fleet of the Caldorian Stellar Dominion. Quite a show of force, said Lieutenant Susan Miller, who stood beside him. Her eyes reflected the distant sparkle of Caldorian warships. They want to impress us, Ryan replied. He straightened his uniform jacket. And I'll admit it's working. The Relentless was humanity's finest vessel, the flagship of Earth's small but capable fleet. Inside its sleek hull, 40 crew members prepared for the first official diplomatic meeting between humans and the Caldorians. 6 weeks ago, a Caldorian scout ship had discovered a human mining operation on an asteroid near the edge of Sol system. Instead of hostility, they had extended an invitation. The vast alien empire wanted to meet their new neighbors. Captain, we're receiving docking instructions, called out Navigation Officer Frank Cooper from his station. They're directing us to the diplomatic bay of their command station. Ryan nodded. Take us in nice and steady. As the Relentless approached the massive space station hanging above Caldor Prime, Ryan couldn't help but feel small. The station alone was bigger than anything humans had built in space, stretching nearly 10 miles across. The Caldorian vessels surrounding it made Earth's entire fleet look like toys. Receiving transmission from Caldorian High Command, said Communications, Officer Grace Palmer. They welcome us to Caldor Prime and request that you and the diplomatic team prepare for shuttle transfer. Ryan turned to the woman standing quietly at the back of the bridge. Admiral Patricia Wells had said little during their journey, but her presence commanded respect. At 62, she was Earth's highest-ranking naval officer and leader of the diplomatic mission. "Admiral, it seems we're expected," Ryan said. Patricia nodded. "Let's not keep them waiting." Her voice was calm, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. This meeting would shape humanity's future among the stars. The shuttle ride to the station was brief. Ryan, Patricia, and 3 diplomatic specialists gazed out at the Caldorian warships as they passed. Each vessel was at least 3 times the size of the Relentless.
47 combat ships, Patricia said quietly. "That's all we have. They must have thousands." "Quality over quantity, Admiral," said Ambassador Daniel Carter with forced cheerfulness. Patricia's expression didn't change. "Let's hope they see
it that way." The shuttle docked with a gentle bump. When the doors slid open, they were greeted by tall, blue-skinned aliens with 4 arms and large oval eyes. The Caldorians wore ornate uniforms covered in what looked like military badges and ribbons. "Welcome to Caldor Command Station," said the tallest Caldorian in slightly accented English. "I am High Commander Zex Tool, military leader of the Caldorian Stellar Dominion." Patricia stepped forward. "Admiral Patricia Wells of the Earth Alliance. Thank you for your invitation, High Commander." Zex Toll's large eyes blinked slowly. "We are always eager to meet new spacefaring species. Please follow me to the diplomatic chambers." The human delegation followed the Caldorians through wide corridors, bustling with alien activity. Ryan noticed how many wore military uniforms, how the station seemed built for war rather than peace. The diplomatic chamber was a large room with a curved table and a spectacular view of Caldor Prime below. Other aliens were already seated. Representatives from various parts of the Caldorian government, Ryan assumed. After formal introductions, the discussions began. The Caldorians asked many questions about Earth, human technology, and especially military capabilities. "So your species controls just one star system?" asked a Caldorian with elaborate face markings. "We have established colonies in 2 nearby systems," Patricia replied. "Proxima Centauri and Tau Ceti. With such limited space presence, your defense force must be modest," said another Caldorian. Daniel Carter spoke up. "The Earth Alliance maintains a fleet appropriate to our current needs. We've focused on quality and technology rather than numbers." This statement caused several Caldorians to exchange looks that Ryan didn't like. "Perhaps you would share the exact size of your combat fleet?" Zex Tool asked. Patricia hesitated only briefly. Lying would be discovered quickly. The Earth Alliance currently maintains 47 combat-capable vessels. A sound like quiet laughter rippled through the Caldorian delegates. 47? Zex Toll repeated. His tone was polite, but Ryan could hear the mockery beneath it. "That is interesting. The smallest provincial defense force in our dominion maintains at least 500 vessels. Our ships are highly advanced," Patricia said firmly. "I'm sure they are for your development stage," Zex Toll replied. "The Caldorian Dominion spans 312 star systems. Our central fleet alone consists of over 6,000 warships." The meeting continued, but the tone had shifted. The Caldorians were still polite, but their questions became more condescending. They spoke about helping humanity develop, about guiding their younger species. They offered technology exchanges that seemed generous on the surface but would give the Caldorians access to Earth systems. At the formal reception that followed, Ryan watched Patricia endure comment after comment about Earth's charming little fleet. The Caldorians didn't even try to hide their amusement anymore. "Such a tiny fleet," Zex Tool said loudly to a group of his officers. "It's almost charming how they believe they belong at the table of spacefaring species." Ryan saw Patricia's jaw tighten, but she maintained her diplomatic smile. Later, as the human delegation prepared to return to their shuttle, Zex Toll approached Patricia one last time. "Admiral Wells, I hope this meeting marks the beginning of a productive relationship between our peoples. The galaxy can be dangerous for small emerging species. The Caldorian Dominion could offer protection." "That's very generous," Patricia replied evenly. "But humanity has survived many challenges. We're quite capable of protecting ourselves." Zex Tool's forearms moved in what might have been a gesture of amusement. Of course. I'm sure your 47 ships are very impressive. On the shuttle, ride back to the Relentless, no one spoke until they were well away from the station. They think we're helpless, Daniel finally said. Patricia looked out at the vast Caldorian fleet surrounding them. Then they don't know humans very well. Ryan noticed something in the Admiral's eyes that hadn't been there before. A quiet anger, but also determination. "What now, Admiral?" he asked. "Now, Captain Bennett, we prepare." Patricia turned from the window. Throughout human history, underestimating your opponent has been a fatal mistake. If the Caldorians want to laugh at our fleet size, let them laugh. "You think they're a threat?" Daniel asked. "I think they see us as weak," Patricia replied. "And in my experience, those who seek out weakness rarely have good intentions." The Relentless pulled away from Caldor Prime, a tiny speck against the backdrop of the massive Caldorian fleet. Unknown to the aliens watching them leave, Patricia was already composing a priority message to Earth Command. The Caldorians had revealed more than they realized during the meeting, and Patricia Wells had fought enough battles to recognize the signs of an empire looking for easy conquest. She just hoped Earth would have time to prepare before the Caldorians decided to test just how tiny humanity's fleet really was. 6 months had passed since the first meeting with the Caldorians. Life on the Proxima Centauri colony continued mostly as normal, but Commander Olivia Martinez could not shake her growing worry. She stood in the colony's control center, watching the large display that showed nearby space. 3 red dots moved slowly just beyond the colony's defensive boundary. "Caldorian warships," said her second-in-command, Lieutenant Paul Wright. "That makes 5 accidental border crossings this week." Olivia nodded. "And it's only Wednesday. Proxima Centauri was humanity's first colony beyond the solar system. Nearly 15,000 people lived here now in the underground habitats and research centers. They had come to study the planet's unique life forms and mine its rich mineral deposits. Now they found themselves on what felt increasingly like a front line." Olivia tapped her communication panel. "Proxima Control to Caldorian. Vessels, you are approaching restricted space. Please adjust your course," the response came quickly. "Proxima Control, this is Captain Drez of the Caldorian Dominion. We are conducting standard military exercises. Your restricted space is not recognized under Dominion protocols." Olivia clenched her jaw. Always the same answer. She sent another message to Earth Command, her 5th this week, detailing the latest incident. The large screen beeped as one of the Caldorian ships moved closer to the boundary. "Should we power up the defense grid?" Paul asked. Olivia hesitated. The colony's defenses were minimal, designed to protect against asteroids and space debris, not warships. If the Caldorians decided to attack, they wouldn't last long. "Not yet," she said finally. "Let's not give them any excuse." On Earth, Ambassador Daniel Carter sat across from the Caldorian representative in a meeting room at the United Nations building in New York. Outside the windows, the city skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. "Ambassador Laxvos, this is the 8th formal complaint I've delivered regarding your military vessels near Proxima Centauri," Daniel said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Your ships are deliberately violating our territorial boundaries." The Caldorian ambassador, smaller than Zextol but with the same blue skin and 4 arms, made a dismissive gesture. "The Dominion does not recognize your claimed boundaries. They exceed standard territorial allocations for developing species." Daniel leaned forward. "Those boundaries were established in accordance with Earth Alliance law. Your borders are only as valid as your ability to defend them," Laxvos replied coldly. "Perhaps if you had more than a handful of ships." Daniel took a deep breath. "The Earth Alliance views these continued violations as provocative acts. We request that Caldorian vessels maintain a distance of at least 1 million kilometers from all human settlements and outposts. I will convey your request to the High Command," Laxvos said, rising from his chair. "But I recommend you consider accepting our offer of protection. The galaxy contains many dangers for isolated colonies with minimal defenses." After the Caldorian left, Daniel sat alone for several minutes. The implied threat was clear. He opened his secure line to President Alicia Morgan's office. "Madam President, the diplomatic approach isn't working," he said when her face appeared on the screen. "They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we push back." Admiral Wells reported the same conclusion after reviewing the Proxima situation, the President replied, her expression grim. "We're accelerating certain preparations, but we need more time." "I'm not sure time is something we have," Daniel said. Near the edge of human space, Lieutenant Eric Johnson piloted his small patrol craft along a standard route. His ship, the Swift, was one of the newer vessels in Earth's fleet designed for long-range scouting and surveillance. Eric enjoyed these solo missions. The quiet of deep space gave him time to think. Today, his patrol took him near the Pulsar research station, where a team of scientists were studying the unique radiation patterns of a nearby dying star. The Horizon, an unarmed research vessel, orbited the pulsar at a safe distance, collecting data that might help develop better navigation systems. Eric was about to check in with the Horizon when his sensors pinged. 3 large vessels had just appeared from FTL travel, less than 50,000 kilometers away. "Kaldorian battle cruisers," he muttered, recognizing their distinctive shape. His training kicked in. Eric adjusted his course to maintain distance and activated his ship's passive scanning systems. The Swift was too small to register on most military sensors from this range. The Kaldorian ships moved directly toward the research station. Eric opened a secure channel. "Horizon, this is Patrol Craft Swift. You have 3 Kaldorian warships approaching your position. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance." The response was immediate. "Swift, this is Dr. Richard Foster. We see them. They're hailing us now, demanding we shut down our..." The transmission cut off. On his screen, Eric watched in horror as bright energy beams lanced out from the lead Kaldorian ship. They struck the Horizon with precision. The research vessel didn't even have time to activate emergency measures. It simply came apart, pieces of it scattering into the void. 23 scientists and crew, gone in seconds. Eric's hands shook as he worked the Swift's controls. He activated all recording systems, capturing every detail of the attack. Then he plotted an emergency jump course back to Earth. The Kaldorians had already turned their ships, scanning the area. They were looking for witnesses. The Swift was designed to be stealthy, but it couldn't hide from a focused search by 3 warships. Eric had only minutes before they would detect him. He sent one final encrypted burst transmission toward Earth with the attack data, then engaged the emergency jump drive. The stars blurred around him as the Swift tore through space, running for home with evidence of an active war. 2 days later, in the Earth Alliance headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Morgan stood with her military advisors, watching the recording of the Horizon's destruction for the 3rd time. "They claim it was a targeting error," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "An unfortunate incident during weapons testing." Admiral Wells shook her head. "There's nothing accidental about those beam trajectories. They knew exactly what they were doing." "Can we prove it?" asked General Nathan Ellis, commander of Earth's ground forces. "Not in a way that would satisfy the Kaldorian legal system," Daniel Carter replied. "Their ambassador has already delivered formal condolences along with a small reparation payment. In their view, the matter is closed." "And if we don't accept that view?" the president asked. Admiral Wells straightened. "Then we're looking at conflict with an empire that controls hundreds of star systems and thousands of warships. An empire that just demonstrated they're willing to kill our people." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation. Humanity's small fleet against the vast Kaldorian dominion seemed like an impossible matchup. President Morgan walked to the window that looked out into the massive underground chamber. Below, hundreds of personnel worked at various stations, monitoring Earth's defenses. "They think they can push us because we appear weak," she said. "They believe our fleet is too small to respond." She turned back to face her advisors. "I think it's time we showed them how wrong they are." "Admiral Wells, is the Spectre program ready?" Patricia Wells allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, madam. President, we can activate immediately. Then do it, President Morgan ordered. The Caldorians want to see what humans are capable of when provoked. Let's show them. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, Dr. Samantha Powell walked through a massive underground facility that officially did not exist. Her footsteps echoed in the wide corridor as she made her way to the command center. Workers and scientists nodded respectfully as she passed. Everyone here knew who she was, the brilliant physicist who had developed much of the technology that made the Spectre program possible. The doors to the command center slid open, revealing a bustling room filled with screens and control stations. In the center stood Admiral Patricia Wells, who had arrived from Earth just hours ago. "Dr. Powell," Patricia said, extending her hand. "It's good to see you again. How soon can we be ready?" Samantha shook the Admiral's hand. "Most systems were already at preliminary activation. We can have the first wave deployed in 36 hours. Patricia nodded. "Good. The President wants a demonstration of capabilities ready within 3 days." Together, they walked to the main display, which showed a three-dimensional map of human and Caldorian space. Red markers indicated known Caldorian military positions. "They still have no idea what's coming, do they?" Samantha asked quietly. "No," Patricia replied. "All our intelligence suggests they believe we're desperately trying to find a diplomatic solution. Their ambassador continues to be condescending, offering protection while their ships push further into our territory." Samantha looked at the map again. "They saw our conventional fleet and assumed that was everything we had. A classic mistake. For the past 20 years, while humanity publicly built a small fleet of regular warships, a much larger portion of Earth's military budget had gone into the Spectre program, a secret initiative to develop unconventional warfare technologies. The program had been created after Earth's devastating Third World War, when military leaders realized that traditional approaches to space defense would leave humans vulnerable to more advanced alien civilizations. Now, in hidden facilities across the solar system, humanity's real fleet waited. In the rings of Saturn, behind thick clouds of ice and dust, Fleet Admiral Christopher Dawson stood on the bridge of the Shadow, the first of humanity's stealth destroyers. Unlike traditional warships with their bright running lights and powerful engines, the Shadow was designed to be invisible to most detection systems. Its hull absorbed sensor scans rather than reflecting them. "Status report," Christopher said, addressing the bridge crew. "All systems green, Admiral," replied his second-in-command, Captain Lisa Rodriguez. "The other ships report ready as well." Christopher nodded. Around them, hidden in Saturn's rings, were 25 identical vessels, the first wave of humanity's hidden fleet. None of these ships had ever been seen by the Caldorians or registered in any public database. "Deployment orders have arrived," Lisa said, reading from her screen. "We're to move to staging positions within the next 24 hours. Christopher studied the tactical display. Soon, the Caldorians would learn that humans had been preparing for this kind of confrontation for decades. "Send acknowledgement to command," he ordered. "Tell them the Shadow Fleet is ready." On Earth, in an underground facility beneath the Nevada desert, Dr. Kevin Rodriguez made final adjustments to a complex machine that filled most of the large chamber. Technicians moved carefully around the sensitive equipment, running last minute checks. "Power levels stable," called out one of the engineers. "Spatial displacement field is forming correctly." Kevin nodded, not looking up from his work. The device he had spent 15 years developing was deceptively simple in concept, but incredibly complex in execution. It allowed ships equipped with special receivers to perform near-instantaneous jumps through space without using the standard navigation routes that the Caldorians monitored. "Dr. Rodriguez," said a voice behind him. "Is it ready?" Kevin turned to see President Alicia Morgan standing at the entrance to the chamber, flanked by security personnel. He straightened up immediately. "Madam President, yes, the system is operational. We've successfully tested it at short ranges. The full-scale implementation is ready." President Morgan walked closer, looking at the massive device. "Explain it to me again. How will this give us an advantage?" Kevin pointed to a holographic display showing the known galaxy. The Caldorians control all major jump points between star systems. Their entire defensive strategy relies on knowing exactly where an enemy fleet can appear. This system lets our ships bypass those restrictions completely. So we can appear anywhere? Without warning? The President asked. Within certain parameters, yes, Kevin replied. We can position our ships directly in Caldorian space, completely bypassing their outer defenses. The President nodded slowly. And they have no idea this technology exists? None at all, Kevin confirmed. We've been extremely careful to hide all research and testing. Good work, Doctor, President Morgan said. Begin final preparations. You'll receive the activation codes when it's time. In orbit around Jupiter, Colonel Grace Wilson supervised the loading of quantum disruption torpedoes onto a fleet of small, automated drone ships. Each torpedo was the size of a car but contained no conventional explosives. Instead, they carried technology designed specifically to disable Caldorian shields and weapons without destroying the ships themselves. Last batch loaded, reported Sergeant John Davis as the final torpedoes were secured. Excellent, Grace replied. Begin pre-launch sequences. We deploy in 18 hours. The drone swarm was another key element of humanity's hidden defense strategy. Traditional space battles relied on large ships with powerful weapons. The Caldorians excelled at this type of warfare. Humans had decided to take a different approach, using thousands of small, expendable drones that could overwhelm enemy targeting. Systems Grace had helped design this strategy after studying Earth's military history. The powerful don't expect the weak to change the rules of engagement, she had told her superiors years ago. The Spectre program was built on that principle. 3 days after the destruction of the research vessel Horizon, High Commander Zex Tool sat in his private chambers on Caldor Prime, reviewing reports from his ships near human space. The primitive humans were reacting exactly as expected, with diplomatic protests and no meaningful military response. A chime indicated an incoming communication. Zextol touched a panel and the face of Fleet Captain Vex Gorin appeared. High Commander, I'm pleased to report that our advance force has moved 10 light minutes beyond the human colony at Proxima Centauri. We've encountered no resistance. Zextool nodded approvingly. Excellent. Continue the operation as planned. What is the status of the human fleet? Most of their ships remain in their home system, Vex Gorin replied. They've sent 2 additional patrol vessels to their colony, but nothing that could threaten our forces. They know they are outmatched, Zextol said with satisfaction. Soon they will accept our protection agreement on our terms. The mineral, resources of their worlds will make a fine addition to the Dominion. There is one unusual development, Vex Gorin added. Several of our sensor stations along the border have reported brief power fluctuations. A technical malfunction, nothing more. Zextol dismissed the concern. The humans lack the capability to interfere with our technology. After the communication ended, Zextol returned to planning the next phase of the Dominion's expansion. The humans would soon understand their place in the galactic hierarchy. Their tiny fleet would not save them. What the High Commander didn't know was that at that very moment hundreds of human vessels were moving silently into position, ready to show the Caldorians just how wrong they were about humanity's capabilities. Nyo. The control center on Mars, Dr. Samantha Powell looked up at Admiral Wells. All systems are go. The first wave is in position. Patricia nodded and opened a secure channel to Earth. Madam President, we're ready to proceed. President Morgan's voice came through clearly. You have authorization, Admiral. Show them what humans can do when pushed too far. Patricia turned to the command staff. Send the activation code. Operation Thunderbolt begins now. On the bridge of the Caldorian defense station orbiting their homeworld, Sub-Commander Trezvon frowned at his control panel. Something strange was happening with their long-range sensors. One by one, monitoring stations along the border with human space were going silent. Status report, he ordered, looking up at his technical officer. Unknown, sir, the officer replied. We've lost contact with 12 monitoring posts in the last hour. Diagnostic systems show no malfunctions before communications ended. Trezvon tapped his communicator. Alert High Command. Request permission to send scout ships to investigate. Before a response came, the main sensor array began beeping urgently. The technical officer's four hands moved rapidly over the controls. Sir, multiple unknown vessels detected. They're everywhere. Impossible, Trezevant said, moving to the main display. Where did they come from? How many? At least 30 ships detected near the homeworld, the officer said, his voice shaking. They appeared out of nowhere, no jump point activations registered. Raise all shields, alert the defense fleet, Trezevant ordered. But even as he spoke, more alarms sounded throughout the station. Commander Kelly Sanderson sat calmly in the captain's chair of the human stealth destroyer Phantom. Her ship, along with 5 others, had just materialized in high orbit over Caldor Prime, the heart of the alien empire. The Rodriguez spatial displacement technology had worked perfectly, allowing them to bypass all of the Caldorians' outer defenses. All ships report successful insertion, said her tactical officer, Lieutenant Alan Price. The Caldorians are only now detecting our presence. Weapons status? Kelly asked. EMP packages ready for deployment. Targeting systems locked on their command and control nodes. Kelly nodded. Deploy as planned. Remember, minimal casualties. We're here to disable, not destroy. Across her view screen, Kelly watched as small, missile-like objects launched from her ship and the others in her squadron. These weren't conventional weapons, but sophisticated electronic warfare packages designed to overwhelm and shut down Caldorian systems without causing physical destruction. Packages away, Alan reported. Impact in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights on the Caldorian station flickered, then dimmed. Around it, the massive warships that protected the homeworld began drifting out of formation as their propulsion systems failed. First phase successful, Kelly reported back to Earth Command. Moving to Phase 2. Across Caldorian space, the same scene played out as human ships appeared simultaneously at key military locations. The Caldorians' carefully organized defense network crumbled in confusion as enemies appeared inside their territory, rather than at the expected jump points. Admiral Jason Howard coordinated the attacks from his command ship near the Caldorian naval base in the Zeta Reticuli system. His screen showed dozens of green dots representing human vessels, systematically disabling Caldorian ships and installations. Beta Group reports success at the shipyards, his communications officer reported. All construction facilities disabled. Delta Group has secured the command hub in the Orion sector, added another officer. Minimal resistance encountered. Jason allowed himself a small smile. The Caldorians had built their entire defense strategy around controlling access points between star systems. They never imagined an enemy could simply appear in their territory without using those routes. Drone swarms deployed and functioning, at 98% efficiency, said his tactical officer. Caldorian point defense systems are overwhelmed. The thousands of small automated drones that Colonel Grace Wilson had prepared were now flying through Caldorian space, targeting weapons and propulsion systems with surgical precision. Too small to track effectively and too numerous to shoot. Down they slipped past the aliens' defenses and delivered their specialized payloads. Send the message, Jason ordered. All frequencies, all Caldorian languages. The communications officer nodded, then transmitted the prepared statement. We don't need 1,000 ships. We just need the right ones in the right places. On Caldor Prime, High Commander Zextol rushed into the emergency command bunker deep beneath the surface. Around him, his senior staff worked frantically to understand what was happening. How is this possible? He demanded. Where did these human ships come from? Unknown, High Commander, replied his chief strategist. They did not use any known jump points. They simply appeared. What of our fleet? Zextol asked. Most vessels report complete systems failure. Weapons, propulsion, and communications are offline. The ships themselves are intact, but useless. Zextol could not believe what he was hearing. Just days ago, he had dismissed the humans as a minor annoyance with their tiny fleet. Now, somehow, they had paralyzed the mighty Caldorian dominion. Get me any functioning ship, he ordered. We must launch a counterattack. Sir, we can't, his communications officer said. All fleet command systems are compromised. Our remaining ships cannot coordinate their actions. For the first time in his long military career, Zexatul felt true fear. The humans had changed the rules of war in ways he couldn't comprehend. Back on the Phantom, Commander Kelly Sanderson received new orders from Earth Command. Her ship moved into position above the Kaldorian Central Government Complex. There, she deployed specialized communication jammers that isolated the Kaldorian leadership from their military forces. Final phase complete, she reported. The Kaldorian command structure is now completely separated from their forces. They cannot coordinate a response. Excellent work, Commander, came Admiral Wells' voice over the secure channel. Maintain position. Ambassador Carter is en route to begin negotiations. Across Kaldorian space, the carefully executed operation continued. Human ships, far more, numerous than the Kaldorians had believed possible, systematically disabled the alien empire's military capabilities. Not through destruction, but through precision technological attacks that left the Kaldorians unharmed, yet unable to fight. The drone swarms proved particularly effective. The small machines slipped through even the tightest defenses, attaching themselves to key systems on Kaldorian ships. Once in place, they released quantum disruption fields that rendered weapons and shields inoperable without damaging the vessels themselves. Admiral Jason Howard watched the operation unfold with satisfaction. The Kaldorians had made a fundamental mistake in their assessment of humanity. They had seen Earth's conventional fleet, the 47 ships that humans had allowed them to see, and assumed that was the extent of their military power. They never questioned why a species with humanity's industrial capacity and war-filled history would maintain such a limited defense force. They never considered that humans might be hiding their true capabilities. 70 hours after Operation Thunderbolt began, Admiral Wells received the report she had been waiting for. Every major Kaldorian military installation had been neutralized. Their fleet, thousands of advanced warships, floated helplessly in space, their crews unharmed but unable to fight. Send word to the President, Patricia instructed her communications officer. The military phase is complete. The Kaldorians are ready for diplomacy. In his bunker on Kaldor Prime, High Commander Zexatul received the message from Earth. It was simple and direct. The Earth Alliance requests an immediate ceasefire and negotiations for a permanent peace. Your answer is expected within 1 hour. Zexatul looked at his advisors. There was no choice. In just 3 days, humans had accomplished what no species had managed in the 1,000-year history of the Kaldorian Dominion. They had rendered the entire Kaldorian military ineffective without firing a single destructive shot. Send our acceptance, he said quietly. Tell them we are ready to negotiate. As the message was sent, Zexatul reflected bitterly on his earlier mockery of humanity's tiny fleet. He had made the worst mistake possible in warfare, underestimating his opponent. The humans, it seemed, had been several steps ahead all along. 3 days after the human strike against the Kaldorian Dominion, representatives from both species gathered in the grand meeting hall of the Kaldorian Central Government Building. The room was silent, except for the soft sound of breathing as Ambassador Daniel Carter stood before the assembled aliens. High Commander Zexatul sat at the center of the Kaldorian delegation. His once proud posture was now stiff with tension. Around him sat the highest-ranking members of the Dominion's government and military, all of them still struggling to understand how quickly their empire had been brought to its knees. The Earth Alliance did not want this conflict, Daniel began, his voice calm but firm. We sought peaceful relations from our first meeting. Yet you mistook our restraint for weakness. You believed our fleet was small because we lacked the capability to build more. Zexatul shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The human was right, and everyone in the room knew it. We could have responded to your aggression with destruction, Daniel continued. Instead, we chose to demonstrate that the size of a fleet matters, far less than how it's employed. Behind Daniel stood Admiral Patricia Wells, Commander Kelly Sanderson, and several other human military leaders. They had removed the stealth technology from their ships, allowing the Caldorians to finally see the true extent of humanity's space force. "The terms of our proposed treaty are simple," Daniel said, gesturing to the document displayed on the large screen behind him. "First, the Caldorian Dominion will respect all human territorial claims and borders. Second, both our species will establish joint defense and technology exchange programs. Third, reparations will be paid to the families of those lost on the EU research vessel Horizon." The Caldorian Prime Minister, a female named Vexlar, who outranked even Zextul in the civilian government, leaned forward. "And if we refuse these terms?" Daniel looked at her steadily. "We have demonstrated our capabilities. We would prefer not to demonstrate them again." The implied threat hung in the air. Everyone present knew that the humans could have destroyed the Caldorian fleet rather than simply disabling it. That they chose not to was perhaps the most frightening aspect of the whole situation. Zextul finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "I wish to understand something, Ambassador. How did your ships appear throughout our territory without using jump points? Such technology should be impossible." Admiral Wells stepped forward. "High Commander, with respect, I believe the more important question is why you assumed you knew the limits of our capabilities." After a brief silence, Vexlar nodded. "The terms are acceptable. We will sign your treaty." As the formal ceremony proceeded, the tension in the room gradually eased. By the time the documents were signed, there was a sense of cautious hope that perhaps this conflict might lead to a more respectful relationship between humans and Caldorians. Later, in a smaller meeting room, Dr. Samantha Powell sat across from a group of Caldorian scientists. They had requested this meeting to better understand the technology that had so thoroughly defeated their defenses. "Your stealth ships," began one of the Caldorians, a senior physicist named Drenvor. "How did you develop such effective cloaking technology?" Samantha smiled slightly. "After our first meeting with your people, we realized that conventional warfare would not be effective against your numerical advantage. So we focused on asymmetric approaches, technology that would allow us to fight on our terms, not yours." "And the spatial displacement system?" asked another scientist. "It violates several laws of physics as we understand them. Perhaps your understanding is incomplete," Samantha suggested gently. "The lesson isn't that humans are inherently superior, but that assumption is the enemy of understanding. You saw our conventional fleet and assumed that was the extent of our capability. You never asked why a species with our history of warfare would expose all its assets." The Caldorian scientists exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with how thoroughly they had underestimated humans. Drenvor nodded slowly. "And now the other powers in the galaxy will look at us and wonder what else the humans might be concealing." "Precisely," Samantha replied. "Sometimes the most devastating weapon is the possibility of what might exist rather than what actually does." On the other side of the government complex, High Commander Zextul met privately with Admiral Wells. The two military leaders stood by a large window overlooking the Caldorian capital city, its tall spires gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. "I made a grave error in judgment," Zextul admitted. "I mistook restraint for weakness and caution for fear, a mistake our military history should have warned against." Patricia nodded. "Throughout human history, underestimating an opponent has often led to defeat. We hoped you would recognize our peaceful intentions without needing this demonstration." "Your response was measured," Zextul said. "You could have destroyed our ships rather than disabling them. You showed remarkable restraint." "The goal was never destruction," Patricia replied, "only to ensure mutual respect." Zextul turned to face her directly. "Tell me honestly, Admiral, how much of your capability did you reveal in this operation? Do humans have even more powerful technologies hidden away?" Patricia smiled slightly but did not answer. The uncertainty, she knew, would serve as a better deterrent than any weapon. 2 weeks later, the Earth Alliance ship Relentless departed from Caldor Prime. Captain Ryan Bennett stood on the bridge, watching the planet shrink in the distance. Beside him, Admiral Wells reviewed reports on a datapad. The Caldorians have already begun implementing the treaty terms, Patricia noted. Their ships have withdrawn from the Proxima Centauri border, and the first reparation payments have been processed. Ryan nodded. Do you think they'll honor the agreement long term? I believe they will, Patricia replied. Nothing encourages peaceful behavior quite like the memory of how quickly their military advantage was neutralized. As the Relentless prepared to jump back to Earth, Ryan thought about how much had changed since their first visit to Caldor Prime. Then, they had been mocked for their tiny fleet. Now they departed as equals, perhaps even as the dominant partner in the relationship. Admiral, he said, do you think other alien species will take note of what happened here? Patricia smiled. Without question. The news is already spreading throughout nearby systems. The story of how humans defeated the mighty Caldorian Dominion will grow with each telling. And if others decide to test us? Ryan asked. Then they will learn the same lesson, Patricia said firmly. Judge us by our actions, not our appearances. Humanity may be new to the galactic stage, but we bring thousands of years of warfare experience with us. The Relentless engaged its engines, leaving Caldorian space behind. Word of what had happened here would indeed spread quickly throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and diplomats to distant worlds. The story would be told and retold, growing, more impressive with each version. In the decades that followed, humanity expanded cautiously into nearby star systems, establishing colonies and trading posts. They encountered other alien civilizations, some friendly and some hostile. But wherever humans went, one fact always preceded them. This was a species with a small fleet that should never, ever be underestimated.